I, and the necessity of defense, preparedness, and preservation. Because the world is not perfect, because there are those who will trespass against us, and because we will all be challenged in our quest for survival, it is important that we know how to defend and protect ourselves, our families, and our communities from all reasonable threats and disasters. Not only should we be taught survival skills, but our government should be structured so as to promote and encourage these skills. We owe it to each other to be prepared for what life brings. The education of ourselves and our children is of particular importance to our quality of life. Evil men have utilized education to corrupt our society and destroy the foundation of our society. Our morality has been compromised, and the virtues of honor and integrity seem to have disappeared from our institutions for the pursuit of power and profit. Many of the good people of America wish only to live their lives in peace, without undue interference from government, and to raise and enjoy their families in moderate prosperity. However, the ever-increasing influence of government and powers of corporate expansion is displacing the small businessman and eroding the ability of the people to survive without sacrificing their fundamental principles. As government and corporations grow, the ability of the people to hold them accountable diminishes. Our rights and liberties are trampled upon, and our quality of life deteriorates. By teaching our children the knowledge and virtues of good government, morality, integrity, honor, self-reliance, and more, we build hope for their future. Our failure to do this will end in their perpetual servitude to the elite few. Subsection 2. Control of education at local level. Public educational curriculum and operations, except funding, for children through the 12th grade shall be regulated solely at the local school district level. Few realize that public education is not a right. Rather, it is a privilege offered by the state to those who qualify and wish to participate. The public school system is controlled by state statute, and as such, must conform with all constitutional mandates. We believe that the state is too far removed from the local populace to satisfy their immediate concerns over the education of their children. Parents, as the rightful protectors of their children, must be provided adequate influence over the materials and programs offered in their children's education. The state should serve merely as counsel. Funding, however, is a more global aspect that should be overseen at the state level, where the general view of the overall welfare of the people can be monitored and equally accommodated. Rather than the state telling the people what can be taught to their children, the people will tell the state what they deem as appropriate. Section F. Governmental transparency. Ohio citizens have the right to monitor, inspect, and audit every function of Ohio government. All books, records, and operations of Ohio government shall be open for public inspection and dissemination under reasonable conditions, excepting such information violative to matters exclusively private in nature, which have been established in law as inappropriate for public review. This provision shall not be construed to protect any party in suit upon just cause from discovery of material evidence of private matters on the public record. Secrecy leads to suspicion and often results in abusive activity. Government, as a servant to the people, must be subject to public scrutiny and investigation to ensure that its integrity is maintained. The only reasonable exception would be the indiscriminate disclosure of personal, private information of individuals which could be used or abused to harass or injure such individuals. In all other situations, the people must be allowed access to the operations of government under reasonable conditions. Section G, subversion of the Constitution. Preservation of individual and state sovereignty is of utmost concern to Ohio citizens. Every attempt to subvert this Constitution, unless by open notice and deliberate action from the citizens, clearly stating their intent to reform or abolish this Constitution or Ohio government, shall be deemed an act of aggression against the citizens of Ohio and is hereby strictly prohibited. Appropriate sanctions and penalties shall be enacted in law and brought against those so doing. Deliberate or substantial acts of subversion of this Constitution shall not be pardonable or otherwise absolved by the governor. We believe that nothing is more important than our freedoms, except perhaps the immediate actions necessary for preservation, and then only as reasonable and necessary to resolve the emergency. Further, our system of government was wisely established to protect our freedoms by separating the general powers of the federal government and those of the states to ensure to the people the ability to govern themselves locally as they deem appropriate for their own happiness and prosperity. Those who serve in government do not have the power to alter, reform, or abolish government. They have only the power to exercise those powers granted by the people to fulfill their duties to the people. Only the people, acting collectively by their consent at the polls, can alter, reform, or abolish their government. When public servants or others attempt to alter, reform, or abolish government without the consent of the people, they are committing an offense against the people. Laws must be established to protect the people from the overthrow of their government without their consent at the polls, and those who do so must be held accountable. The severity of such an offense is such that it cannot be pardonable or absolved by the governor. Section H, maintenance of laws. Subsection 1, future laws. All provisions of this Constitution and laws, rules, regulations, and other governing provisions of Ohio and its political subdivisions shall be created, interpreted, applied, and enforced in compliance with this amendment. The principles set forth in this amendment are so fundamental to the preservation of our rights and liberties and the sovereignty of Ohio among the states of the Union that they must take precedence when interpreting and applying the laws of Ohio. The first priority of government is to recognize that its purpose is to secure and protect those rights and liberties and to provide for the happiness and prosperity of the people. These fundamental principles do not change with time for a free society, except to perpetuate a despotic or socialistic one. The American people have allowed these traits to take root at the expense of our freedoms. Either we will live as independent, free men and women, doing what is necessary to preserve it, or we will fall into slavery at the will of a few for their own purposes. The powers of government must never exceed the powers granted to it by the people, and all future laws must honor that limitation. Subsection 2, transformation of existing laws. Ohio and all its political subdivisions shall alter, amend, or repeal as applicable and without undue delay all existing laws, rules, regulations, and other governing provisions to fully comply with this amendment within 4 years from the effective date of this amendment. Priority shall be afforded to those laws and provisions that protect the rights, liberties, and principles of due process of and for the people. All existing laws and provisions shall remain enforceable during said 4-year period unless defeated upon meritorious constitutional challenge. Those failing to be reviewed or amended for constitutional compliancy within the said 4-year period are thereby repealed by operation of law. Influenced by sources outside the established elements of Ohio government in fulfilling this mandate shall be strictly prohibited, except as may be offered in open public forum by the relevant controlling governmental element. It shall be the duty and responsibility of the state to provide the resources necessary to satisfy this provision. This provision shall expire upon termination of said 4-year period. Because we, the people of Ohio, have not kept a sufficient watch over our government for a long time, Ohio laws and other governing provisions have become quite voluminous, oppressive, and violative to our Constitution. Many of the laws on Ohio's books are private in nature and do not constitute law at all. Rather, they are enforced by private agreement. This condition has been implemented by acts of deception, fraud, and neglect or abuse of public office by those whose duty it was to serve the people with honor and integrity. We cannot allow such laws to cause further injury to Ohioans. The burden this provision places upon government is substantial, but not unreasonable. Indeed, if government had not abused its powers and authorities, this burden would be quite minor, because our laws would have already satisfied the requirements set forth in this amendment. This mandate is the duty of government to fulfill, and the infiltration of special interests operating to subvert or pervert this duty cannot be tolerated. The integrity of our Ohio Constitution must be maintained, and compliance to it must be satisfied within a reasonable time, and it must be prudently executed by the state. This concludes our review of the actual language contained in the Ohio Sovereignty Amendment. So what effects will this amendment have on government? Well, the general effects are Ohio government will be mandated by law to adhere to our state and federal constitutions. Public servants will be liable for fines and punishments for violating the constitutions. Ohioans will have the lawful means to hold government accountable. The rights and liberties of Ohioans will be better protected. Ohioans will have more freedom of choice, be better informed, and more secure. Ohio government will become smaller and less intrusive. Ohioans will become more free, but also more responsible for their own happiness. The federal government will have less influence over Ohioans, and Ohio may become known as the Freedom State.